Here's a question I'd like us to sit with for a second. If you opened a journaling app right now, one of the AI ones, the kind that responds to you, to what you write and asks you follow-up questions, and you wrote about something you've been obsessed over, would that help you process it? Or would you just end up with a more organized version of the same loop? Because those are not the same thing, and the differences matter more than most of these apps will tell you. Today, we'll be auditing the AI journaling category against a single clinical question. Can prompted writing actually help you shift from rumination to reflection? Or does it just dress up the loop in better language? 3 apps, 3 criteria, and a verdict at the end that might surprise you, because the answer isn't really about which app is best. Quick note before we start, none of the apps I'm reviewing today have any commercial relationship with MetaTherapy. No sponsorship, no affiliate arrangement. What you're getting is clinical evaluation and not a product review. If you watched Monday's episode this week, the meditation on shifting out of rumination, this is the companion. Same framework, different medium. If you haven't seen it, that's fine. I'll give you what you need. So each of these apps cites research. Rosebud cites CBT. Mindsera cites Aaron Beck. Most of them, somewhere in their marketing, mentions James Pennebaker. Pennebaker is a psychologist who pioneered expressive writing research. Starting in the 1980s, he ran studies where people wrote about their deepest thoughts and feelings about difficult experiences, 15 minutes a day, 3 to 4 days a week. And he found consistent benefits: reduced anxiety, improved immune function, lower healthcare utilization. Across more than 100 studies, the effect size averages around a Cohen's d of 0.16. And that's real. It's modest, but it's real. A 2006 study by Gortner, Rude, and Pennebaker found that expressive writing reduces depressive symptoms in vulnerable students at 6-month follow-up. The mechanism? Changes in the brooding subscale of the ruminative response scale, not the reflection subscale. Writing that works does so by reducing brooding specifically. That finding matters. It means writing works when it works by interruptive, passive, repetitive self-focus, not by producing more insight, not by generating more reflection, by getting you out of the loop. Here's what the apps leave out in their marketing. Pennebaker himself has said he's not a fan of journaling every day. And more directly, he has warned that writing can become another form of rumination if the person repeats the same language without going anywhere new. One person's processing is another person's loop. The writing looks the same from the outside. The outcome is completely different. His team now recommends delaying expressive writing for at least 1 to 2 months after an acute event, or until the person is, in his words, thinking too much about it, which is a clinically interesting threshold. Writing about a trauma 2 weeks after it happened is probably appropriate. Writing about it at the same intensity 6 months later is a signal that something is stuck. And writing more about it may not be the answer. So the question isn't whether journaling works. It does, sometimes. The question is what separates writing that helps from writing that keeps you in the loop. And that's the question these apps are trying to engineer their way out of, with some mixed results. So I want to be a little upfront about how I built this evaluation. I'm not using the app's own metrics, engagement rates, user satisfaction scores, app store ratings. I'm using 3 criteria drawn from what the research actually says about when writing helps versus when it doesn't. So, criteria number 1, prompt directionality. Does the prompt pull the user toward curiosity and forward movement, or does it invite rehashing? A prompt like, how did that make you feel, can go either way. A prompt like, what would it mean to let this situation stay unresolved, is pulling toward something. The directionality of the prompt is doing clinical work or failing to. Criteria number 2, repetition risk. Most of these apps have streak mechanics. Write every day, build the habit, and habit formation is real. Consistency matters. But streaks also create pressure to journal even when there's nothing new to extract from a topic. And that pressure is exactly where writing tips from processing into looping. And then criteria number 3, escalation awareness. This is the hardest problem in the space. Can the app detect when a user is looping, same topic, same language, no forward movement, and do something different, not generate more prompts about the same thing, a different prompt, or a redirect, or in the most clinically honest version, a signal that this might be something to bring to a therapist rather than write about more? Detecting narrative stagnation in someone's private journal entries in real time without clinical training, that's not solved. And so we need to name that honestly. So now let's run these 3 apps through this framework. So the app called Rosebud is the most clinically oriented app in this category. It uses a chat interface. You write, the AI responds with follow-up questions. The framework underneath is primarily CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy and ACT. And the prompt sequences are built partly on Pennebaker's expressive writing research. On prompt directionality, it's the strongest option here. The follow-up questions are adaptive. They're generated based on what the user actually wrote, not a fixed bank of prompts. So if you write about feeling overwhelmed at work, it doesn't just ask, how did that make you feel? It might ask, you mentioned feeling overwhelmed by your workload yesterday. What's one small thing you could do today to reclaim a little ground? That's a forward-oriented prompt. It's actually doing something. Rosebud's prompt design draws on Pennebaker's finding that therapeutic writing benefits come from moving toward narrative coherence, organizing experience into a story with cause and meaning, not just emotional venting. The adaptive follow-up is attempting to replicate that scaffolding. The concern is repetition risk. Rosebud has a streak mechanic, daily reminders, intention setting for the year, all of which create genuine adherence, and adherence is valuable. But it also creates pressure to journal even when you've already extracted everything useful from a topic. And after extended use, users report that responses start to feel formulaic, same CBT reframing patterns applied to a different context, and the scaffolding becomes the ceiling. On the category of escalation awareness, there's really no documented mechanism. The app doesn't detect when you're writing about the same thing in the same way with no forward movement and redirect. That's not a criticism unique to Rosebud, by the way. No app in this category has actually solved it. But it's worth naming because it's exactly the condition under which journaling stops helping and starts maintaining the loop. Rosebud verdict, best in class for prompt use. Use it with self-imposed topic limits. If you've written about the same situation for 4 or 5 times and you're still stuck, that's not a journaling problem. That maybe is a therapy problem. So next we're going to talk about Mindsera. Mindsera is doing something genuinely different from the other apps in this category, where Rosebud is emotionally oriented. How are you feeling? What does that mean for you? Mindsera is cognitively oriented. It's built around mental models and cognitive bias detection. The lineage is Aaron Beck's CBT detection, specifically the idea that thinking errors are the primary driver of emotional distress, and identifying them is the first step to changing them. If you write something that reflects all or nothing thinking, this always happens to me, I never get this right, Mindsera flags it. It surfaces the distortion and prompts a reframe. That's doing real clinical work. It's not just responding to the content of what you wrote, it's responding to the structure of how you're thinking. On repetition risk, Mindsera is the strongest here, and it's structural, not accidental. The kind of person drawn to Mindsera tends to be analytically oriented. They want frameworks and mental models. And that orientation actually provides a natural break on pure emotional looping because the tool keeps redirecting towards structure rather than the feeling. The risk that comes with that is intellectualization as avoidance. If you're someone who uses cognitive frameworks to stay out of emotional material, and some of us do, Mindsera will give you very sophisticated tools to do that more efficiently. They can't tell the difference between someone who's reframing productively and someone who's using reframing to avoid feeling something. So what's the verdict? Mindsera is the strongest anti-rumination design in this category, best suited to analytically oriented users who want to work on cognitive distortions. If emotional processing, grief, relation pain, loss is what you're carrying, Mindsera may keep you in your head when you need to be somewhere else. So the last app we're going to talk about today is called Day One. It is the most mature, most polished journaling application available. Rich media support, photos, audio, video, location tagging, end-to-end encryption, a record of your life that's genuinely beautiful to scroll through. In 2024, they added AI smart prompts, and I want to be careful here because Day One is excellent, just not at what other apps are trying to do. The smart prompts generate questions, but they don't read your entries, identify patterns, or adapt based on what you've written. They're a fixed prompt system with an AI label. What's something you're grateful for today is a fine prompt. But it's the same prompt regardless of whether you've been writing about your gratitude for 3 years or just had the worst week of your life. On repetition risk, Day One has no streak pressure, no daily nudges toward the same topic. But that's not because of thoughtful anti-rumination design. It's because the app isn't trying to be a processing tool at all. Low repetition risk for the wrong reason. So Day One verdict, use it to document your life. Use photos, location, voice memos. Read back through it in 5 years. It's genuinely good at that. If you're working through something emotionally difficult, though, use a different tool. So what's the overall verdict? Well, if you want guided emotional processing with a CBT backbone, Rosebud. It's the most clinically aligned option for working through anxiety, relational stress, everyday emotional processing. Set a self-imposed rule. If you've written about the same topic 5 or more times without resolution, stop writing about it and bring it somewhere else. If you're analytically oriented, you want to catch cognitive distortions, or you're working on metacognition, Mindsera. Watch for using the cognitive framework to stay out of emotional material. Structure is a tool, not a destination. And if you want to document your life beautifully and occasionally reflect on it, Day One is your tool. Just know what you're using it for. It's a record, not a processing tool. And if you're in an acute ruminative loop right now, something you've been going over and over for weeks, something that's affecting your sleep or your relationships or your ability to be present, none of these apps are the right first move. That's a therapy conversation. The research on expressive writing is clear that writing about an acute crisis often amplifies rather than processes it. So all in all, looking at the whole picture, the app is the least important variable here. Prompt quality matters. The writer's orientation matters more. And whether the writer can tell the difference between processing and replaying, that matters most. No app in this category reliably solves for that third variable. And until one does, the most important thing you can bring to any of these tools isn't the right subscription plan. It's the capacity to notice when you're looping. So what would be a well-designed tool actually need to do? It would need to detect narrative stagnation, same language, same themes, no forward movement across entries, and respond differently. Not with more prompts about the same thing, with a prompt that changes the angle entirely, or reflection that says, you've written about this a few times. What would it mean to try to resolve it in here? If you haven't watched Monday's episode this week, the meditation is shifting out of rumination, and that's linked in the description and pinned in the comments. 15 minutes. It teaches the same framework we used today, but experientially rather than analytically. Some of you will find that more useful than any of the apps I reviewed. Next Tuesday, we're going to continue in this lane, looking at another category of mental health tools and asking the same question. Is the mechanism real, or is the marketing running ahead of the evidence? Subscribe if you want to know that episode has dropped. And if this was useful, share it with someone who's been asking whether these apps actually work. Now you can tell them it depends on the variable that none of the apps can control. I'm Dominic Doria, and this has been MetaTherapy. I'll see you next week.